Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my thoughts on We Who Are About To by Joanna Russ. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, time for my thoughts on another one of my science fiction for the somewhat hesitant project reads. Today it is the turn of the short novel or novella, We Who Are About To... by Joanna Russ. This is a very short one. This was just under 120 pages. Usual spoiler warning for you. I'm not going to discuss any of the kind of major plot points in detail. If you want to go in completely blind to this one, then do feel free to click away now and come back to the video once you've read it. So what is this about then? This essentially subverts the kind of stranded on a desert planet tropes of a lot of the science fiction, of the classic science fiction of the era. This was written first published in 1976, I think. It's quite a philosophical piece. It's very critical of traditional gender roles. Russ has got a lot to say on that. And the story centres around a group of people. It's 5 women and 3 men. One of the women is a child, a girl, who crash land on an unknown planet. At first, the majority of the group envisages building a new society, colonisation basically, to ensure their survival and to perpetuate humanity. But our unnamed female protagonist in this, our narrator, challenges that notion. She's extremely sceptical from the outset of the group's chances of survival, and she's unwilling to conform to the group's kind of expectations of procreation, to rebuild civilization on this planet. And so as tensions mount and the protagonist's dissent and refusal to participate in the group's plans lead to kind of an escalation of the conflict between them. And at the midpoint of the book, things take a dark and introspective turn. So there's your basic kind of rundown of the premise, etc. So what did I think of this one then? This was a book of two halves, absolutely a book of two halves. One half I really liked, the other half I didn't. The story itself is told through kind of a series of voice memos. The protagonist is kind of recording her thoughts and observations and sort of events that happen within the group via a piece of tech called I think it's called a vocoder, which is essentially like a futuristic sort of dictaphone type thing. So we're only getting her perspective. So there is a certain amount of unreliable narrator within this. And by virtue of the fact that we spend pretty much the whole book seeing things only from the protagonist's perspective, she is the most developed character in it for sure. All of the others are quite surface level. They're kind of archetypes really, but I think that's intentional on Russ's part. They represent specific sorts of people or viewpoints, all of which our protagonist is in opposition to. I kind of liked the protagonist for the first half of the book. None of the characters are particularly likeable, her included, but there were elements to her character that I did really enjoy. She's the realist amongst the group. She's the outsider, really, because of that and for other reasons. She's the only one really who recognises that they are pretty screwed from the outset. They've landed on this planet where it's unlikely that rescue will arrive. A little bit of that, the reasons why that's the case, are gone into in the early part of the book. They've only got 6 months of food and supplies. They've got a water purification system, but it's got a limited lifespan. She knows they're all on borrowed time, basically. But her realism or skepticism, pessimism even in some cases, is unwelcome, very unwelcome to the rest of the group, and she's kind of made a pariah partly because of that. But she's got some like extremely acerbic wit. She does not mince her words, and I really liked that. But the second half of the book, I liked her less and less, to the point towards the end where I just didn't like her anymore. The prose was extremely rambling in the second half, and got more so, and it kind of jumps around a bit, and it was a bit kind of like, I couldn't kind of keep a hold on it, if you like, and that just kind of didn't help me keep connected to that character at all. Whilst we're on the prose and the writing, Russ has quite a strange style. It took me a while to get into it. Some of her sentence structure, the way that she structures sentences, paragraphs, things like that, word choices, syntax, it felt at times quite odd to me. It was quite a difficult one to get into. I didn't like it at first, but once I kind of got into it and kind of got into the rhythm of it a little bit, I started to really enjoy it, especially the dark humour, as I say, especially the dark humour. But again, like the second half of the book, I ended up losing patience with it. So I kind of ended up coming full circle from not liking it to really liking it to not liking it again. It can just feel really inaccessible at times, and there was a distance to it that kept me at arm's length from the character and the story. I think that's what it was. It's quite a sparse book in terms of sort of description, exposition about the setting of this planet, but that's fine. That's not the focus of this book. There was plenty in there to allow me to picture it clearly, to get a real sense of what the place was like, the kind of the desolation of it, and the kind of the unknown threats of it. What there might kill them, could they drink the water, all that kind of stuff. And I think the lack of the information about the planet that the characters had, and therefore we had, just made it feel more intriguing, more threatening, etc., and more tense, them being in this unknown place. And I think the atmosphere, the tense atmosphere, caused by this being on this unknown planet, and largely, in the majority of the book, the tension that comes from the conflict between those in the group of survivors, in the first half of the book, I thought was excellently done. That atmosphere really came through well, and I really enjoyed that. Russ writes that very well. The plot of the first half moved at a really good pace. It was really engaging. There's a really good sense of something really bad on the horizon. It builds really well. The sort of the escalation of events really worked well at keeping me turning the page, keeping me in it. And then again, the second half, not so much. The second half, after this kind of pivot point in the book, lagged a lot for me. I found myself drifting in terms of concentration, focus when reading it. I think it felt like it went on too long, that back half, and that's, it's not a long book. It's a very short book, but for me, it could have been shorter. The second part, some of the stuff in the second part outstayed its welcome for me by the end. The ideas in it, however, are really interesting. The ideas that Russ poses in the first half, especially on like gender expectations, feminism, conformity, survivalism, all of that kind of stuff, are expressed brilliantly and brutally. But the second half primarily deals with ideas about death, really. Choosing your time, dignity in death, things like that. That really is the focus, especially in the second half of the book, is that that thought about death, the considerations, philosophizing about death. Whilst these are discussions and ideas that I am more than happy to read about, and they are things that I actively think about in my own philosophizing, when I just sit and think various things, I do think about stuff like that. I do consider things like that. But the way Russ incorporates them and expresses them in the second half of the book, just I think wasn't really for me. I think that's a criticism of the writing style rather than the protagonist's position on those sort of things. It just wasn't accessible for me. It just didn't work for me. So did I enjoy this then? Yes and no. As I say, it's a book of two halves for me. The first half I think is absolutely superb, and I really appreciated all of that stuff. The second half, I just didn't really enjoy at all. And I was kind of glad to be done, to be honest, with it by the time I finished it. Yes, it's a pretty bleak and depressing story, but I don't mind that. That's not why I disliked elements of it. I think for me, it's more that I just didn't get on with the writing and the storytelling in that second half. So my ratings for this one then, I will pop them up on screen as per usual, and I'll whip through them. So character then, I've given this a 7. I think the characters were all decent. There was interest certainly in even the sort of the less developed members of the group other than the protagonist. I think the protagonist was very well done, particularly in the first half. A very kind of flawed character, someone who I kind of liked and disliked at the same time. But yeah, generally good characters. Atmosphere, setting, that kind of thing. I've given a 7 again. Solid, absolutely solid. Intriguing, interesting, a sense of threat, great sense of tension and conflict, that kind of thing. Writing is a 6. It's okay to me. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a very personal one for me. I just didn't get on with it by the end. As I say, I came full circle with it. There are elements of it I really like. I think Russ's humour, dark humour, and general kind of darkness in this is great. Some of the philosophising, that kind of thing, not so much my cup of tea in terms of the actual way that it's written. Plot is a 6 again. Again, it's okay. First half, great. Second half, not so great for me, especially in terms of pacing. The first half was spot on for me in terms of its pacing, and then the second half dragged massively. Ideas is an 8. The ideas in this are great. The discussions in it are great. I don't necessarily get on with the style in which they are written, but once I get past that, when I look past the style and my aversion to some of the stylistic elements, what Russ is saying and what she's trying to impart is important, and it's sharp. A lot of what she's saying, it's a smart book. So I thought the ideas here were great, and there was plenty of things for me to think about, questions, etc. So that's and that's always appreciated. It's one thing I love about science fiction. Enjoyment then is a 5. As I say, the first half I really liked, but then by the time I got to the end of it, I was just glad to be done with it. So it's very, very much in the middle on my enjoyment. So if I add all of those scores up and divide by 6, we get a 6.5 out of 10. That will go on the story graph at a 3 stars. So those are my thoughts on We Who Are About To. A partial success, I would call that. The first half I would read again, for sure. I thought the first half, as I say, was great. But then I would stop at a certain point in the book. But still an important book, very sharp book, intelligent book. And yeah, I'm open to trying some more Russ, I'll say that. I do have The Female Man here on my bookshelf somewhere up there. Um, but I can't say I'm eager to dive in straight away. But I will definitely go back to it in the future, as I really liked the premise of it. And there were elements to Russ's style, especially like the humour side of things, that I really liked a lot. So we'll see. We'll see how I fare with some more Russ in the future. So 2 more books to go before the end of science fiction for the somewhat hesitant year 1. I'm currently in the middle of Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Wow, is that a tough read? Especially at the moment. It's perhaps a little too relatable to our actual reality. But it's so damn good that it just wants to make me keep listening to it. I have it on audiobook. And then after that, I've got my final one, which is Space Opera by Catherine M. Valente, which should be some queer, campy, fun science fiction, I believe. And that'll see the year out. And the final reviews for the final 2 books will be out early in January. But then it's time to start to think about year 2. And that is what I'm going to be talking through in my video on Sunday. Yep, I got 24 more science fiction novels for 2025. I can't not continue with this project. I am loving it. So that will do from me today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do let me know in the comments if you have read We Who Are About To and what you made of it. I'll be back in a couple of days with those plans for science fiction for the somewhat less hesitant year 2 of this project. So I do hope you'll join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.